The year was 2347, and humanity had no idea that the universe was watching them. For 12,000 years, the Galactic Confederacy had ruled the stars. They were an alliance of 47 alien species, each one conquered and absorbed into a massive empire. Their warships numbered in the millions. Their soldiers were countless. Every planet they visited eventually surrendered, because no one was foolish enough to fight against such power. When their probe ships first detected Earth's radio signals decades ago, they studied humanity from afar. They watched human television broadcasts. They listened to human music. They read human books that floated through space on radio waves. And they decided that humans were weak, divided, and primitive. So they came. Admiral stood on the bridge of his ship, the UES Indomitable, when the alarm started screaming. He was a tall man with gray hair and deep lines on his face from years of service. He had fought in 3 wars on Earth before joining the United Earth Fleet, and he had seen many terrible things, but nothing had prepared him for what appeared on his screen. 3,000 alien warships emerged from Fold space like monsters rising from the ocean. Each ship was massive, some of them larger than cities. They blocked out the stars as they formed a wall of metal and weapons around Earth's solar system. "Sir," his officer said with a shaking voice, "we are receiving a transmission." The message was simple and cold. The Galactic Confederacy demanded total surrender. Humanity would disarm immediately. Human leaders would present themselves for judgment. Human worlds would become property of the Confederacy. Resistance would result in complete extinction. Watched the message play again and again. His crew looked at him with fear in their eyes. Their fleet had only 200 warships. Against 3,000 alien vessels, they had no chance. But did not feel fear. He felt something else entirely. He felt the same cold anger that had burned in his chest when foreign armies had invaded his homeland decades ago. He felt the same determination that had driven humanity through countless wars and disasters throughout history. He opened a channel to Earth. "Connect me to Secretary General Park." On Earth, the leaders of humanity gathered in emergency meetings. Nations that had fought each other for centuries now sat together, watching the alien armada on their screens. Old enemies held hands. Ancient grudges were forgotten. For the first time in human history, every single person on the planet agreed on one thing: they would not surrender. Secretary General Park was a woman of 53 years. She had grown up in poverty, worked her way through politics, and become the most powerful human alive. She was known for her sharp mind and sharper tongue. When the alien envoy requested a meeting, she agreed without hesitation. The envoy was a creature that stood 3 meters tall. It had 4 arms, compound eyes that saw in every direction, and a mouth full of sharp teeth. It arrived on Earth with an escort of 50 soldiers, each one armed with weapons that could level buildings. Met them in Geneva, in the same hall where humans had signed peace treaties for centuries. She brought no soldiers. She brought no weapons. She wore a simple black suit and stood with her arms crossed as the alien creature approached. The looked down at her with what might have been amusement. "You are the leader of this species." "I am." "You are smaller than I expected. Your ships are primitive. Your weapons are laughable. Why do you not kneel?" Smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a woman who had faced death many times and no longer feared it. "Tell me something. You studied our transmissions for decades, yes. You watched our history." "We did. We saw your wars, your genocides, your endless violence against each other." They made a sound that might have been laughter. "You are a fractured, primitive species. You cannot even live in peace with yourselves. And yet you bring 3,000 warships to our door," tilted her head. "If we are so weak, why do you need such a large fleet?" The eyes flickered. For a moment it said nothing. "Let me tell you what you saw in our transmissions," continued. "You saw us killing each other. You saw us destroying cities and burning nations. You thought this made us weak. She stepped closer to the massive alien, showing no fear. "You were wrong. It made us strong." "You speak nonsense." "Do I? We have spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of war. We have invented weapons that can split atoms. We have created diseases that can kill millions. We have burned each other's cities and risen from the ashes every single time." Her voice dropped to a whisper that somehow filled the entire hall. "We are the most violent species in this galaxy, and you just threatened our children." The step back. It was a small movement, almost invisible, but saw it. She saw the first crack in the alien's confidence. "You have 7 planetary rotations to surrender," the said, but its voice was less certain now. "Resistance is mathematically impossible." "Mathematics," laughed. "Your mathematics cannot calculate human stubbornness. It cannot measure human rage. And it definitely cannot predict what we will do to you if you harm a single human child." She turned her back on the alien, the ultimate insult. "Go back to your ships. Tell your masters that humanity refuses. Tell them that we would rather burn our own world than let you have it. Tell them that every human, from the oldest grandmother to the youngest baby, will fight until their last breath." She looked over her shoulder and her eyes were like ice. "And tell them this: you should have left us alone." The returned to its ship and reported to the Confederacy's commanders. For the first time in 3,000 years, they held an emergency meeting. They had conquered 47 species. They had never, not once, been refused like this. "They are bluffing," said one commander. "They must be." "Their fleet is nothing," said another. "We will crush them in hours." But there was one old admiral, a veteran of countless conquests, who remained silent. He had watched the recording of this meeting. He had seen the look in her eyes, and he felt something he had not felt in centuries. Doubt. 7 days passed. Humanity did not surrender. Instead, they did something the Confederacy had never seen before. They prepared. Every factory on Earth switched to war production. Every scientist worked day and night. Every soldier said goodbye to their families and reported for duty. Churches, mosques, and temples filled with people praying not for peace, but for victory. And in secret bases hidden throughout the solar system, weapons that the Confederacy knew nothing about powered up for the first time. On the 7th day, Admiral stood on the bridge of his ship and watched the alien armada begin its approach. His fleet was outnumbered 15-1. His ships were smaller and weaker. By every logical measure, they had already lost. But was not thinking about logic. He was thinking about his on Earth. He was thinking about his wife, who had kissed him goodbye and told him to make the aliens pay. He was thinking about 10,000 years of human history, filled with impossible victories against impossible odds. He opened a channel to his fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral, today we fight. Not because we can win, but because we refuse to lose. Make them remember us, make them fear us, and make them regret ever coming to our home." The first human missiles launched into the void. The war for Earth had begun. The first battle lasted 17 hours, and it changed the galaxy forever. Lieutenant Commander sat in the cockpit of her strike fighter, strapped so tightly that she could barely breathe. She was 31 years old, with short black hair and steady hands that never shook, even now, even as 3,000 alien warships filled her screen like a swarm of metal locusts. She had trained for this moment her entire adult life. The United Earth Fleet had always known that aliens existed. They had prepared in secret, building weapons and training soldiers for a war that most people thought would never come. Had been recruited at 14, trained at the best military academy on Earth, and had spent 17 years learning how to kill things that came from the stars. Now it was time to prove that the training was worth it. "All fighters, this is Commander," she said into her radio. "Remember your training. Remember the swarm doctrine. We are not going to fight them ship to ship. We are going to drown them in chaos." The swarm doctrine was humanity's secret weapon. For decades, military scientists had studied how aliens might fight. They looked at every science fiction movie, every book, every game. They realized that most species probably fought the same way. Big ships, organized formations, predictable tactics. Fleet against fleet like ancient naval battles in space. Humanity decided to fight differently. Instead of building a few large ships, they built thousands of small ones. Instead of organizing into neat formations, they spread out like angry wasps. Instead of following predictable tactics, they did whatever caused the most chaos. The aliens expected a battle. Humanity gave them a nightmare. Launch all drones, Admiral ordered from the Indomitable. Activate the mining platforms. Wake up the submarines. Across the solar system, humanity's trap revealed itself. The Confederacy's sensors screamed warnings as 10,000 unmanned drones launched from hidden bases on asteroids and moons. These were not expensive, advanced machines. They were cheap, disposable, and packed with explosives. They flew directly at the alien fleet like a cloud of metal insects. The aliens destroyed hundreds of them, then thousands, but there were always more. While the drones attacked from the front, something else attacked from below. On Europa, Jupiter's frozen moon, submarines broke through the ice and launched missiles into space. These missiles carried nuclear warheads, each one powerful enough to destroy a city. They flew toward the alien fleet on trails of fire. And from the asteroid belt, humanity's mining platforms opened fire. These were not weapons in the traditional sense. They were mass drivers, machines designed to throw rocks through space for mining operations. But rocks thrown at high speed become weapons. Tungsten rods the size of cars flew toward the alien ships at speeds that made them almost impossible to dodge. The Confederacy's fleet commander, unnamed, stared at his tactical display in disbelief. His ships were taking damage from every direction. His sensors could not track all the threats. His carefully planned formation was falling apart as captains broke ranks to dodge missiles and drones. "This is impossible," he said. "Our intelligence showed they only had 200 combat vessels." His aide checked the data again. "They do only have 200 combat vessels, Commander, but everything else is attacking us too. Their cargo ships are launching missiles. Their space stations are firing weapons. Even their communication satellites are ramming our ships." Felt cold fear creep into his heart. The Confederacy had conquered 47 species. Every single one of them had fought the same way, organized military against organized military. No one had ever turned their entire civilization into a weapon before. Squadron dove through the chaos, weaving between explosions and debris. Her wingman, Sergeant, flew beside her with perfect precision. They had trained together for 6 years. They could read each other's movements without speaking. "Target acquired," said. "Enemy command ship bearing 773. Saw it on her screen. A massive vessel, larger than any human ship, bristling with weapons. It was the command center of the alien fleet. If they could destroy it, the enemy would be thrown into confusion. "All fighters follow me," she ordered. "We're going to cut off the head of the snake." They flew straight at the command ship, dodging defensive fire that could have vaporized them in seconds. Felt her ship shake as explosions bloomed around her. Warning lights flashed on her console. Her shields were failing. Her engines were overheating. She did not slow down. "Almost there," said through gritted teeth. "Just a little closer." The alien ship's weapons focused on them. A beam of energy sliced through space, so close that felt the heat through her cockpit. Another fighter in her squadron exploded, then another. She was losing her people, but she could not stop now. "Fire everything," she ordered. 20 human fighters launched their missiles at the same moment. The weapons flew straight and true, slamming into the command ship's hull. Explosions ripped through alien metal. Secondary blasts tore the ship apart from the inside. Watched the massive vessel break into pieces. its lights flickering and dying as it fell into Jupiter's gravity well. "Target destroyed," whooped, "We got them," but was already looking at her tactical display. They had destroyed the command ship, but the alien fleet was still there. Damaged, confused, but not defeated, and they were regrouping near Jupiter, forming into new battle lines. "They're not retreating," she said. "They're getting ready for round two." Back on the Indomitable, Admiral studied the battle results. Humanity had destroyed 400 alien ships in the first engagement. They had lost 60 ships of their own, plus thousands of drones and missiles. By normal military calculations, it was a stunning victory. But normal calculations did not apply here. "They still have over 2,000 warships," his aide reported, "and our missile stocks are down to 40%, drone reserves at 30%. Nodded slowly. He had known this would happen. The first battle was never going to win the war. It was only meant to prove a point. "Did we get the message through?" he asked. "Yes, sir. All data has been transmitted to Earth." Good. Now the people back home knew what they were facing. They knew that the aliens could be hurt. They knew that the war would be long and bloody. And they knew that victory was possible if they were willing to pay the price. "Signal all ships," said. "Fall back to defensive positions around Earth. Let them come to us." The alien fleet advanced slowly, more cautious now. Commander had received reinforcements from nearby systems. 5,000 more ships were on their way. Soon, the humans would be outnumbered 10-1, then 20-1, then 50-1. But no longer felt confident. He had studied the battle recordings. He had seen how the humans fought, like cornered animals willing to die as long as they took enemies with them. He had seen the look in that human woman's eyes when she refused to surrender. For the first time in his long career, began to wonder if numbers would be enough. On Earth, the people watched the battle footage on every screen. They saw their ships fighting against impossible odds. They saw their pilots dying to protect their home. They saw the alien fleet retreating, even if only temporarily. And instead of fear, they felt something else: pride, determination, rage. Secretary General Park addressed the planet that night. Her words were simple and direct. "Today we proved that we can hurt them. Tomorrow we will prove that we can beat them. This war will be long. This war will be painful. Many of us will not live to see its end. But our children will be free. Our species will survive. And the galaxy will learn that humanity does not surrender." Across the world, people cheered. Factories worked through the night. Soldiers kissed their families and returned to duty. Scientists worked on new weapons that would take the fight to the stars. The first battle was over. The real war was about to begin. And humanity was ready to make the universe bleed. 3 years into the war, Earth was burning. The Galactic Confederacy had learned from their early defeats. They stopped fighting with honor and started fighting with numbers. Every month, more ships arrived from distant stars. Every month, humanity's defenses grew weaker. The brave pilots who had won the first battles were dead, their ships scattered across the solar system like fallen leaves. In the end, the aliens did what humanity had feared most. They bypassed the remaining fleet and landed directly on Earth. O remembered the day the sky turned black with alien. She had been a teacher at a small school inn, showing her students how to solve math problems. When the sirens started, she had calmly led them to the basement shelter, holding their hands and telling them stories to keep them from crying. That was 3 years ago. Now she led a resistance cell of 47 fighters, and she had killed more aliens than she could count. The occupation of Earth was nothing like the Confederacy expected. On other planets, conquered species had surrendered after their militaries fell. They accepted their new rulers and went back to their lives. Humans did not do this. Humans fought from the ruins of their cities. They fought from sewers and tunnels and collapsed buildings. They made bombs from kitchen chemicals and weapons from garden tools. They attacked supply convoys and assassinated commanders and sabotaged everything they could reach. Cell specialized in assassination. She and her people had killed 17 Confederacy commanders in 6 months, striking without warning and disappearing into the rubble before the enemy could respond. Tonight, their target was a general who had ordered the destruction of a refugee camp. 3,000 humans had died in that attack, including 200 children, had promised herself that the general would pay. She moved through the shadows of what had once been a shopping district. The stores were burned shells now, their windows shattered and their goods looted. Alien patrols walked the streets, their weapons ready, but they moved in predictable patterns. After 3 years, knew those patterns better than she knew her own heartbeat. Her second-in-command, a former factory worker named, appeared beside her without making a sound. He was missing 2 fingers on his left hand, taken by alien torturers who had tried to make him talk. He had not spoken a single word to them. "The general's transport will pass through here in 10 minutes, he whispered. "Security team of 12 soldiers." Nodded. 12 soldiers was a lot, but her people had faced worse. Everyone in position. "Yes, we're ready." She checked her weapon one more time. It was not a fancy alien gun or a military rifle. It was a simple explosive device made from fertilizer and old electronics, designed to stick to the bottom of a vehicle and detonate on command. Low technology, but effective. The general's transport appeared on schedule, a floating vehicle covered in armor and shields. It moved slowly through the ruined streets, surrounded by soldiers who scanned every shadow for threats. They did not scan the ground. "Press the detonator." The explosion lit up the night, throwing the transport into the air and scattering the soldiers like broken toys. Before the survivors could recover, fighters opened fire from their hidden positions. The battle lasted less than a minute. When it was over, walked to the burning wreck of the transport. The general was still alive, trapped under twisted metal, green blood leaking from a dozen wounds. "You," it hissed, "you are the one they call the ghost of." "I am." "Why do you fight? Your cities are destroyed, your armies are gone, your species has lost." Knelt beside the dying alien. She thought about her students, scattered now across a dozen refugee camps. She thought about her husband, killed in the first bombing. She thought about the 3,000 people in that refugee camp, buried in a mass grave that no one would ever find. "We have not lost," she said quietly. "We are still fighting. As long as one human breathes, you have not won." The general's eyes flickered with something that might have been fear. "You cannot win against the Confederacy. It is impossible." "Maybe," stood up, "but we can make sure you never forget the price of fighting us." She walked away into the darkness. Behind her, her fighters finished what needed to be done. Across the planet, stories like hers. In the mountains of what had once been Switzerland, an old farmer named spent 3 months digging a tunnel beneath an enemy supply depot. When the tunnel was complete, he collapsed it, burying himself and 10,000 tons of alien equipment under a mountain of rock. His last words, recorded on a device that is found years later, were simple: "Tell them I died standing." In the ruins of Tokyo, a child named led an alien patrol into a minefield. She was only 12 years old, but she walked calmly and confidently, smiling at the soldiers and pointing ahead as if she knew where she was going. When the mines started exploding, she was caught in the blast too. A resistance fighter who watched from hiding said later that she was still smiling when she died. The Confederacy had conquered 47 species. None of them had fought like this. None of them had made occupation so expensive in blood and resources. None of them had produced children willing to die rather than submit. In the Himalayan mountains, deep beneath the snow, the last remnants of the United Earth government huddled in bunkers. Admiral, now old and missing one eye, met with his remaining commanders around a battered table. "Status report," he said. his voice tired but steady. Captain Shin, his most trusted aide, pulled up a holographic display. She was younger than the others, only 30, but she had seen more combat than soldiers twice her age. Our fleet is down to 47 ships, sir. Ground forces are scattered and cannot coordinate. We estimate we've lost 60% of our population. 60%. 4 billion people dead in 3 years. Closed his eye and took a deep breath. By any rational measure, they had lost. The Confederacy held every major city. Their ships controlled the skies. Their soldiers walked the streets of human capitals. But the resistance continued. Every day, alien soldiers died. Every day, supply convoys were destroyed. Every day, the Confederacy spent more resources holding Earth than they had spent conquering their last 10 planets combined. "How long until Project Retribution is ready?" asked. Hesitated. 3 months, sir. Maybe 2 if we push the timeline. Push it. She nodded. There's something else, sir. We've received a transmission from Secretary General Park. She's asking about our terms for surrender. The room went silent. Every commander knew what surrender would mean. The Confederacy had been clear. All military leaders would be publicly executed. All weapons would be destroyed. Humanity would become slaves. Opened his eye and looked around the table. He saw exhaustion in every face. He saw grief and pain and despair. But beneath all of that, he saw something else. He saw the same stubbornness that had driven humanity through 10,000 years of war and disaster. Our terms are simple, he said. They leave, all of them. Every ship, every soldier, every piece of equipment. They go back to their space and they never return. And if they refuse, he paused, then we teach them what human revenge really looks like. The commanders nodded. There was no debate, no argument. They all knew what was coming. Somewhere above them, the alien fleet orbited a burning world, confident in their victory. They did not know about the weapon being built in secret. They did not know about the scientists working day and night in hidden laboratories. They did not know that humanity had one final card to play. And when they finally learned, it would be too late. In her bunker on Mars, Secretary General Park recorded a message for the resistance fighters on Earth. Her face was thin now, her hair gray with stress, but her eyes still burned with unbroken fire. To all humans still fighting, she said, I know you are tired, I know you are afraid, I know you have lost people you loved, but I need you to hold on a little longer. We are building something that will end this war, something that will make the galaxy remember us forever. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was soft but certain. They thought they could break us. They were wrong. We are humanity. We do not break. We bend, we bleed, we suffer, but we never ever break. The message spread across the planet, carried by hidden radios and whispered from person to person. And in the ruins of their cities, in the shadows of their conquered world, humans listened. They cleaned their weapons. They checked their explosives. They prepared for one more night of resistance. The long night was not over yet, but dawn was coming. In a secret laboratory hidden beneath the frozen surface of Pluto, humanity built its final weapon. Doctor had not slept in 4 days. Her eyes were red, her hands trembled from too much coffee, and she had forgotten what real food tasted like. But she could not stop. Not now when they were so close. She was 45 years old, the most brilliant physicist humanity had ever produced. Before the war, she had been famous for her work on gravity and space-time. She had won awards, given lectures at the best universities, and dreamed of helping humanity reach the stars. Now she was building a weapon that could end interstellar civilization forever. Run the simulation again, she told her team of exhausted scientists. They obeyed without question. Numbers scrolled across screens, equations that most humans could never understand. Watched them with hungry eyes, searching for any flaw, any mistake that could make the weapon fail. There was none. The weapon would work. She walked to the window and looked out at the massive structure being built in Pluto's orbit. It was called the Retribution Device, and it was ugly. A tangled mass of metal and energy coils, powered by every scrap of antimatter that humanity could produce. It looked like something a child had built from scrap, not a weapon that could reshape the galaxy. But appearances meant nothing. What mattered was what it could do. Had discovered the secret by accident during the war's first year. She had been studying fold space, the dimension that the Confederacy used for faster-than-light travel. Everyone knew that fold space existed. Everyone knew that it allowed ships to cross light years in moments, but no one had looked closely at its structure. When she found something terrifying. Fold space was not stable. It was more like a soap bubble than a solid dimension, held together by forces that were barely understood. And if you applied the right frequency of gravitational waves to that bubble, it would pop. The results would be catastrophic beyond imagination. Every ship currently in fold space would be destroyed instantly, ripped apart by forces that no shield could stop. Every fold space engine in the galaxy would detonate, unleashing explosions that could crack planets. Every species that depended on faster-than-light travel would be thrown back to there, isolated and alone. Including humanity. Had presented her findings to Admiral 3 years ago. She had expected him to be horrified. Instead, he had smiled, a cold and terrible expression that she still saw in her nightmares. "Build it," he had said, "build it now." On Mars, Secretary General Park stared at the holographic display of the Retribution Device. She had read reports a dozen times. She understood what the weapon would do, and she felt sick to her stomach. "You're asking me to approve the end of interstellar civilization," she said. Admiral's face appeared on the screen, transmitted from his bunker on Earth. He looked older than she remembered, broken by years of war and loss. But his eye burned with the same determination she had seen on the day the aliens first arrived. "I'm asking you to save humanity," he said. "By killing billions of innocent people. Every colony cut off from supply lines will starve. Every ship in transit will be destroyed. Species that have nothing to do with this war will suffer." Yes. The simple admission hung in the air between them. Wanted to scream at him, to call him a monster, to refuse everything he was asking. But she could not, because she knew he was right. "The Confederacy will never stop," continued. "Even if we negotiate peace, they will return in a century with better weapons. They have conquered 47 species. They will not let the 48th escape. Our only choice is to change the rules of the game. By destroying the game itself. Yes, if no one can travel between stars, no one can invade. Every species will be trapped in their own system, forced to rebuild from nothing. The Confederacy will collapse. Their empire will fall apart. And humanity will be alone, forever." Was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was soft. "I have watched our world burn for 3 years. I have seen children die in front of their parents. I have ordered soldiers to fight battles I knew they could not win. I have done terrible things in the name of survival." He leaned closer to the camera. "But I have never lied to myself about what we are fighting for. We are not fighting to win. We are fighting to make our enemies pay such a price that no one will ever threaten us again. This weapon is that price." Closed her eyes. She thought about Earth, burning and occupied. She thought about the resistance fighters dying every night in pointless battles. She thought about the billions of humans who had already died, and the billions more who would die if the war continued. And she thought about her daughter, hidden in a bunker somewhere on the moon, who might live to see a future free of alien threats. "We cannot use this weapon without warning," she said finally. "If we are going to do this, we must give them a chance to withdraw. We must let them choose." "You want to negotiate?" "I want to show the galaxy that we are not monsters, that we gave them a choice and they refused." She opened her eyes, and her expression was as hard as stone. "When we activate the weapon, I want every species in the universe to know that they brought this on themselves. Nodded slowly. Agreed, I'll prepare the transmission. 3 days later, the message went out on every frequency, translated into every language the Confederacy used. It showed Secretary General Park standing in a simple room, her face calm and her voice steady. To the Galactic Confederacy and all species of the known universe, she began. For 5 years you have made war against humanity. You have burned our cities, killed our people, and tried to break our spirit. You have failed. Behind her, images appeared. The retribution device, the equations that proved it would work, the simulations showing what would happen when it activated. We have built a weapon that can destroy fold space itself. When we activate it, every ship in transit will be destroyed. Every fold space engine will detonate. Interstellar travel will become impossible for generations, perhaps forever. She paused, letting the words sink in. We do not want to use this weapon. We do not want to end the age of interstellar civilization, but we will do it without hesitation if you force us to. Her voice hardened. You have 12 hours to begin withdrawing your forces from our solar system. You have 1 month to complete the withdrawal and agree to permanent non-interference with human space. If you refuse, we will activate the retribution device. She leaned toward the camera, and her eyes burned with fury that had been building for 5 years. You came to our world expecting easy prey. You found something else. You found a species that would rather destroy everything than live as slaves. Make your choice. Leave or watch the stars go dark. The transmission ended. In the Confederacy's capital, panic spread like wildfire. The Supreme Council convened for the first time in 3 centuries, arguing about whether the humans were bluffing, whether the weapon was real, whether they could destroy it before it activated. But deep down, they already knew the answer. They had seen how humans fought. They had watched them sacrifice everything rather than surrender. They had learned that humans meant every threat they made. The humans were not bluffing. And now the entire galaxy had to decide. Was conquering one small species worth losing the stars forever? The clock was ticking. On Pluto, Doctor made the final adjustments to the retribution device. Her hands were steady now. Her doubts were gone. She had made peace with what she was about to do. If the Confederacy, she would dismantle the weapon and return to her peaceful research. But if they refused, she would press the button without hesitation. She had seen what the aliens did to Earth. She had lost friends, family, colleagues. She had watched everything she loved burn. Now it was time for the galaxy to burn instead. Device is ready, she reported, awaiting final authorization. In her bunker on Mars, Secretary General Park sat alone in the darkness, waiting for the Confederacy's response. 11 hours remained. The Galactic Confederacy's Supreme Council chamber had not seen such chaos in 3,000 years. 47 species screamed at each other across the vast circular room. Holograms flickered as representatives argued, threatened, and pleaded. Some demanded immediate attack on the human weapon. Others begged for withdrawal. A few suggested that the humans were bluffing and should be ignored. But above all the noise, one voice cut through with cold certainty. They are not bluffing. The chamber fell silent. Every eye turned to the speaker, an ancient named. He was the oldest living member of the council, a veteran of conquests that most species had forgotten. His shell was cracked with age, his movements slow and painful, but his mind was still sharp as a blade. I watched the recording of their leader, continued. I saw her eyes. She meant every word. The humans will destroy fold space if we do not withdraw. Impossible, spat a representative from a warrior species called the. No species would condemn themselves to isolation. They are trying to scare us into retreat. No, shook his massive head. You do not understand humans. I have studied them since our first contact. They are not like us. They are not like any species we have conquered. He pressed a button, and images appeared in the center of the chamber. Images from Earth's history, collected from human broadcasts over decades. "Look at them," said. "They dropped atomic weapons on their own cities to end a war. They sent soldiers to die in frozen mountains and burning deserts for ideas they could not even see or touch. They killed millions of their own kind over disagreements about invisible gods." The images changed, showing the resistance fighters on Earth, farmers with explosives, children leading soldiers into minefields, grandmothers poisoning enemy food supplies. In 3 years of occupation, we have lost more soldiers on Earth than we lost conquering the last 20 planets combined. Every city we hold costs us blood. Every road we travel holds ambushes. Every human we capture dies rather than give us information. He turned to face the council directly. "This is not a species that values survival above all else. This is a species that values revenge. They will destroy themselves to destroy us. I have no doubt of this." The chamber erupted into arguments again, but noticed something. The voices calling for attack were fewer now. The representatives were starting to calculate the cost of calling humanity's bluff. Was conquering one planet worth losing the stars? On the Retribution device platform, Doctor watched the countdown timer. 4 hours remained. Her finger rested near the activation button, not touching it, but close enough that she could press it in a second. She thought about what would happen if she pressed it. Ships torn apart across the galaxy, engines exploding like bombs, colonies cut off from supplies, doomed to slow starvation. Species that had never threatened humanity would suffer for the crimes of the Confederacy. She thought about whether she could live with herself afterward. Then she thought about her brother, killed when the aliens bombed Seoul. She thought about her parents, lost when their refugee ship was shot down. She thought about her students, scattered across a dozen worlds, never knowing if they were alive or dead. Yes, she could live with it. "Doctor," a voice came through her communicator. It was Admiral. "The Confederacy's response is coming through." His heart stopped. This was it, the moment that would decide humanity's future. "Put it through." The holographic display flickered, and the face appeared. Behind him, the Supreme Council chamber was visible, filled with aliens watching in tense silence. "Humans," began. His voice was heavy, tired, defeated. "The Galactic Confederacy has debated your ultimatum. We have considered our options. We have calculated the costs." He paused and realized he was struggling to speak the next words. For a species that had never surrendered, this was the hardest thing they had ever done. "We will withdraw." Felt her legs go weak. She grabbed the edge of her console to keep from falling. "Our fleet will begin leaving your solar system within the hour," continued. "Full withdrawal will be complete within 1 month. We agree to permanent non-interference with human space. In exchange, you will not activate your weapon." He leaned closer to the camera, and his ancient eyes met hers across the void of space. "But know this, humans. We do not surrender because we fear death. We surrender because we finally understand what you are. You are not a species that can be conquered. You are a species that will burn the galaxy rather than submit. And that makes you the most dangerous thing the universe has ever seen." The transmission ended. For a long moment, stood in silence. Then she began to laugh, a sound that mixed relief and exhaustion and years of suppressed fear. Around her, her team of scientists joined in, hugging each other and crying and celebrating a victory that had seemed impossible just hours ago. On Earth, the resistance fighters emerged from their hiding places and watched the alien liftoff. They did not cheer. They did not celebrate. They simply stood in silence, watching their enemies leave, unable to believe it was finally over. O walked through the ruins of, stepping over rubble and broken glass. The streets where she had once taught children to read were empty now, the buildings collapsed, the parks burned. But the aliens were leaving. Her home was free. She found a spot where a school had once stood and sat down on a piece of broken concrete. For the first time in 3 years, she allowed herself to cry. On Mars, Secretary General Park received the news with quiet dignity. She thanked her staff, issued orders to begin coordinating the withdrawal, and retired to her quarters. There, alone, she poured herself a glass of water and raised it to the window. "We did it," she whispered to no one. "We actually did it." 3 months later, the last alien ship left Sol's system. Humanity watched them go with weapons ready, not trusting, not relaxing until the final vessel vanished into fold space. The treaties that followed were signed on neutral ground, aboard a station that had once been a battlefield. The Confederacy granted humanity permanent sovereignty over their solar system and surrounding space. They agreed to warn all species against interference with human territory. They promised never to return. In exchange, humanity agreed to keep the retribution device dormant. Not destroyed, just dormant. A threat that would hang over the galaxy forever, a reminder of what humans could do if pushed too far. Admiral did not live to see Earth's reconstruction. His body, worn out by years of war and stress, gave up 2 years after the peace treaty was signed. He died in a hospital overlooking Bay, watching the city's towers rise from the ashes. His aide, Captain Shin, was with him at the end. She recorded his last words as he had asked her to. "They thought fear was a weakness," he whispered. "They never understood. Fear is a gift. It tells you what to avoid. We never feared death. We only feared failing to make our enemies pay for causing it." His words became humanity's unofficial motto, carved into monuments and taught in schools. They reminded every generation that followed of what their ancestors had done, and what they were capable of doing again if necessary. 100 years later, humanity had rebuilt. Their cities rose higher than before, gleaming towers of glass and steel reaching toward the stars. Their ships traveled farther than the Confederacy's ever had, using new drives that humanity had invented themselves. They did not use fold space. They kept that technology dormant, a sleeping dragon that they refused to wake. Instead, they developed new methods of travel, slower but safer, that did not depend on the dimension they had threatened to destroy. And throughout the galaxy, the story of humanity spread. Parents told their children about the small blue planet that had the greatest empire in history. Teachers taught students about the species that would rather destroy everything than live as slaves. Diplomats warned their governments never to threaten human space. When young aliens asked what humans were like, the answer was always the same. Be polite, be respectful, trade with them, talk to them, learn from them, but never ever threaten them. The humans do not forget. The humans do not forgive. And if you push them hard enough, they will burn the stars themselves to see you fall. On Earth, in a museum built on the spot where Park had first refused the alien ultimatum, a plaque displayed her words from that day. "We are the most violent species in this galaxy, and you just threatened our children." Visitors from dozens of human colonies came to see it. They stood in silence, reading the words, remembering the price their ancestors had paid for freedom. And somewhere in the depths of space, the retribution device waited, dormant, patient, a reminder to the universe that humanity's vengeance was never more than a button press away. The galaxy had threatened humanity and found no fear. Only retribution. The end.